the Fed has been propping up housing prices. We saw this last year. They had a home buyer tax credit. And as we know most recently, they've been buying mortgage-backed securities. They're actually one of the largest. I think they're buying about 70% of mortgages right now. So right now, if you go to get a mortgage, your average credit score is about 700. Back a couple of years ago, it was 600. They'd give you a mortgage if you look good. So this is a problem because we have a couple things that are going on. We have a Fed that's going to be selling, at least getting out of the mortgage-backed security market. And again, they represent 70% of that market right now. And we have rates that will probably be going up. So this is a concern and makes us even more concerned about the housing market. Over the last couple weeks, we've already seen that we've gone back into a double dip there, and we think that there's a little bit of a ways to go. So while talking about the consumer, we'll talk a little bit about oil and gasoline prices. Over the past 30 years, oil shocks have contributed or caused almost every single recession during that period of time. And some of these statistics may be a little bit off, which I'm about to say, but I think the point will come across. In the US, for every 1,000 people, we own about 750 cars. If you look at India and China, for every 1,000 people, there's about 30 to 60 cars, 30 to 50 cars. And that rate is increasing exponentially. You finally have a middle class that has some disposable income that is spending it, and it's pretty exciting, for these countries. And not only are they buying cars, but you can finally go out in some places and get a cold drink or get produce that's actually cold. And we take that for granted here in the U.S., and that's something that's just beginning in a lot of other countries. And what that's doing is creating a huge demand for energy infrastructure, for different kinds of commodities, and for different types of fuels. And in our opinion, high energy prices are here to stay. They could certainly come down, but we're living in a world of very high energy prices, and I don't really see a great way out of that in any time soon. The problem with that is for every 10% increase in the price of oil, it detracts about 0.2 to 0.3% from GDP. And again, in the face of what's going on with the consumer, it's somewhat concerning. I think that the U.S. economy will be fine if oil prices stay where they are. If they go beyond $135 a barrel, we see ourselves going back into recession. We don't see that happening, but it is one of our risks that we are concerned about, is prices going beyond 130, 135 and staying there. So in January, the FOMC got together and they talked about their projections of GDP for the U.S. They got together here in April and revised that downwards. So in the U.S., they revised their GDP forecast downwards and inflation upwards. And since then, commodity prices, fuel prices have moved up a little bit. And again, we think that these prices will continue to move up. So in our opinion, they're a little bit more optimistic. We think that 2011 GDP will come in somewhere in the mid to high twos. 2012, we're going to talk in a little bit about the debt problem that we have. And if we are going to cut back on spending, I think it's going to hurt GDP then. I think we have a very troubled consumer. So I think in 2012, again, while we don't fall back into recession, it will be more in the high 2 area, much less than a lot of what we're hearing from the government. So just back to switch around a little bit to markets. We talked about one of the reasons that the stock market should continue to do well is this dramatic corporate earnings and how they continue to do extremely well. The other thing is what we're seeing is finally, after years and years and years, we're seeing a change of inflows from stocks into bonds. So people are worried about what's going on with rates, what's going to happen to the value of our bonds. And for the first time in many, many years, we're seeing outflows out of bonds and we're seeing inflows into stock. Where else are you going to put your money? In the money market yielding zero? Probably not. So We're seeing the markets continue to move up as a result of that. We think there'll be a floor in the market as a result of not only the corporate earnings, but this inflow as well. As we start getting later in the year, we are more concerned about corporate earnings as a whole. Right now, corporate earnings are, the margins are at record highs. And if there's anything we know from looking in history, it's that there's generally a reversion to the mean. And that's exactly, I think, what's going to be going on over the next couple of quarters. We've already seen, if you look in the details of S&P, the companies reporting in the S&P, a higher and higher majority are having lower and lower margins. And this is mostly a result of commodity costs, and a lot of that hasn't been through the system yet. Companies have done a good job so far passing that higher commodity cost onto the consumer. And we saw GM come out with earnings a couple of weeks ago or last week, and they said that the prices of cars are probably going to be going up again. They've already gone up twice over the last year. Walmart CEO came out and said, look, folks, everything's going to start getting more expensive. And we've already talked about a consumer in a very weak state of mind, or at least not a powerful state of mind. So I think this is going to be a problem in the case that the companies are not going to be able to pass on these costs, or at least not all the costs the way that they expect to. So I don't know about you. I know the Fed is saying that there's no inflation. So I just saw, I guess, when I drove up here from Princeton this afternoon, and it cost me about $80 to fill my tank, and I saw that eggs went up over the last month by 50%. I don't know, we don't eat tons of eggs, but I guess that's bad. But I do go to the grocery store, and I know the cost of cereals and everything, they're going to the moon. And as a consumer, there's a lot less in the bank at the end of the day when you have these type of things happen. And again, I think this is even further evidence to show that these companies are going to have considerably more issues going to the later half of the year. This is one of the reasons why, as a strategy standpoint, we're trying to underweight things like consumer discretionaries, consumer staples, things that have very high input costs. We're concerned about their profit margins as we get forward to the end of the year.